This beautiful object is a pate en croute. It's one of the glories of French civilization. And here's its secret. It's ground meat in fancy dress. We're doing meatloaf masquerade today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. This is a pate en croute. And what it is, this is the croute, which is a crust, and here is the pate inside, which is ground meat. And I'm going to cut you another slice so you can see what it's like. And there's a little truffle in there, and there is ground meat and ham and veal and all kinds of delicious things. And there are many ways of making pates, and this is a particularly nice one, and it's not too difficult to do. So that I'm going to show you how to make it in the real French way. And I'm going to show you a first-class pate mixture because it's so terribly good. I think you'll probably want to know the real way to do it, and I'm going to give alternates as I go along, because within the pate crust you can really put anything you want, but this is the real French pate mixture, and these are all ground meats. And in this one, which is typical, you start out with 2 3/4 cup of lean ground veal. I'm going to give you the proportions for 8 cups of mixture, and I'm going to do really I'm going to do a token mixture, but I'm going to give you the proportions for 8 cups. So first, 2 3/4 cup of finely ground lean veal, and then 2 3/4 cup of either lean ground pork, which is typical of a French pate, or as an alternate, you could use goose or duck meat, finely ground. And then the third ingredient is fat. And you have to have fat in a pate mixture, because if you don't, it's going to be dry, and the fat gives you the texture that you want. And you want 2.5 cups of either pork fat or 2.5 cups of a combination of goose or chicken fat plus dry white breadcrumbs that have been mixed, that have been moistened with a little bit of bouillon or milk. And then you want 4 eggs. Pretend that that's 4 eggs rather than 2. And then we want a tablespoon and 2/3 of salt. So that would be 5 teaspoons. That would be 1 2/3 tablespoons. I'm going to pretend that that's 1 2/3 tablespoons now. And then you want 2 cloves of garlic. You just put unpeeled garlic into a press and go clump. You could use 1 or 2 cloves, depending how much you like garlic. And 1 teaspoon of thyme, Thyme. And if you have it, some ground bay leaf, about 1/4 teaspoon of ground bay leaf, and some allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of that, and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and use freshly ground pepper, about 6 or 8 grinds, and then 1 cup of minced cooked onions. And you're going to beat this up nicely. And you can do this either by hand, but if you happen to have a heavy-duty electric mixer, it's a lot easier. But you want to beat it up until the whole mixture is lovely and light and fluffy. And that'll take, by hand, it'll take several vigorous minutes. And then after it's fully mixed and light and fluffy, you take a little bit like this, and then you saute it in a small frying pan so that you can check the seasoning. And it's very important to saute and check the seasoning because it's raw pork, and so it's very dangerous to eat raw pork. And you couldn't tell anyway exactly how the seasoning would be with raw meat. And then we want 1/3 cup of cognac. So you see, a real French pate mixture is fairly luxurious. And then we have a garniture that always goes into the pate. And usually it's usually strips of veal cut about like that, or else you can use dices of veal and mix it all into your meat. And if you would like, you can use a truffle. And this is a truffle, a little black thing. They're called black diamonds, and they're very, very expensive. And chop them up like that, and put them into the veal, and then add 2 or 3 tablespoons of cognac, and a little fresh pepper, and a little bit of salt, and let that macerate while you're doing the rest of your business. And that will pick up some flavor, and there's a little bit of chopped scallion or shallot, and stir all of that up. And you can add ham, and you can add other kinds of things, depending on what you want to have in your pate. And then you have the next thing which you're going to make, which is the dough for the pate, or the croute. I'm always urging you to make dough, but then pastry dough is terribly typical of French cooking, because they can do a lot of things well, like a meatloaf like this, and dress it up in dough, and you think you've got something absolutely amazing. Now, for this we want to have 2 pounds of flour, which is 7 cups. Again, I'm just going to do a token. And then you want to have 2 sticks of butter, chilled cold butter, which you cut up into small pieces rapidly. And then 12 tablespoons of lard. And the lard is good because that's a pound of lard. That would be an 1/8, and there would be, heavens, I can't figure that out. But anyway, figure out 12 tablespoons of lard, which you cut up also very fine. And then you want 1 2/3 tablespoons of salt. You would work the lard if you have a, and there's your salt. And then you have to break this into the flour, break the fat into the flour, and you do it either with the tips of your fingers like that, or you could use it with a pastry blender. There's a pastry blender, and do it this way, or do it in an electric mixer. We've done that several times, and it's really a much easier way to do, but I thought I would show you how to do it by hand. And you want to break it up until it looks like fine meal. And the reason that the machine is very good to use is that you can break it up without softening the fat, which is very important. So if it gets too hot, put it in the refrigerator. And then you're ready to add the liquid after the flour and the fat have all been broken up. And the liquid is 2 cups, of which you have 4 egg yolks. 2 cups of liquid, 4 egg yolks, and the rest very cold water. And you beat it all up, mix it into the pate, mix it into your dough, and then stir it around with a rubber spatula. And then put it out onto a pastry board or marble, and make it into a rough ball. And if you need a little bit more liquid, you can add it at this point and knead it just a little bit. And then it has to rest. And the reason it has to rest is so that the flour will absorb the liquid. And then in it goes. I'm doing this rather fast. I want you to get the idea of how to do it. And then this goes into a plastic bag. And then it must rest in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours so that the fat will congeal again and get nice and hard, and so that the gluten in the dough and so that the gluten in the flour will relax so that you can roll it out. And this dough is called a pate, and the meat mixture that we had is called a farce fine. Farce, F-A-R-C-E, meaning stuffing. And now you're all ready to form the pate, and you can form it in several ways. You can use a special pate form, or you can use the free-form method like this, which uses no form at all and no special equipment. And this is done a great deal in French charcuteries. And because I wanted you to see how it's done by a real professional, one day when I was in France and I had a date with my friend Simone Beck, I made a rendezvous with a charming charcutier for a private lesson.
So happy to meet you.
Well, it's not too late, I hope.
Not too late, never too late.
Eh bien, voilà. Entre madame.
Laurent, voilà.
Bien.
Monsieur Boussageon,
Oui.
bonjour.
Bonjour.
Comment
Bonjour,
ça
madame.
va
Ça va,
alors?
Bonjour.
Madame, ça va bien?
Nous avons toujours notre rendez-vous
Ah
pour
oui, oui,
voir
bien
en
sûr,
arrière.
bien sûr, oui.
Pour les
Simka, I'm going to see some pâtés
Very
being
well.
made. You know it very well, but I haven't seen it.
Very
Only a
well.
minute.
Suivre.
Go and see them.
Entendu, merci.
I'm going to see them later.
All right.
I'm going to choose something.
Voilà. Alors, donc, la pâte brisée.
That's a pie crust dough. Mais il y a de l'œuf dedans?
Oui,
There's
oui.
an egg in it.
On met 2 œufs au kilo.
2 eggs to the kilo. And how
Oui.
much? Combien de graisse?
Alors, vous mettez 400 grammes de beurre pour 1 kilo de farine.
400 grams of, well, it's 4 parts of butter to 10 parts of flour. Et puis an
Et
egg.
20 grammes de sel par kilo.
20 grams of salt, and that counts. Too difficult to describe. Et la farce, c'est quoi? C'est
Alors, porc et veau.
pork and veal,
Oui.
et
Au milieu, nous mettrons un peu de foie gras.
a little foie gras in the middle of it.
Voilà.
That's enormous. Et ça, c'est tout assaisonné avec du cognac ou
Oui, du cognac, du marc.
du marc. Marc, that's an eau de vie. This
Oui.
is, c'est ça, marc.
C'est
oui,
ça,
oui,
c'est ça,
c'est
oui.
a white,
Oui.
very strong white distilled liquor. These are great big pieces. Rather than cutting them, he leaves them big.
C'est ça. C'est beaucoup mieux pour la coupe.
Uh-huh.
Oui,
Because
et c'est les morceaux sont dénervés.
they've all been trimmed and there isn't any gristle in it, and he has them large so that when you cut it, it's much prettier.
Alors, on va couper
Voilà le foie gras. This
foie
is
gras.
foie gras, truffled foie gras. Ça, c'est luxueux comme...
Ah oui, oui.
Look at those truffles.
Oui.
Mon Dieu.
Oui, ça c'est joli comme fabrication.
Those are all those truffles in there. I've never seen so many truffles. Je n'ai jamais vu tant de truffes dans un pâté.
Vous voyez.
Ça doit être une bonne marque.
Voilà.
Oh, it's a good brand of foie gras. See, those are all going down the middle, so they'll make a lovely design. It smells Ça sent bon déjà.
Il faut, ouais.
It
Il faut.
already smells good. There's rather than brandy in it, there is this eau de vie. Mais il y a du cognac aussi.
Oui, oui, un petit peu de cognac.
There's
Oui.
brandy as well as
Oui.
eau de vie.
Alors, on va le recouvrir de farce.
Now I'll put the other half of the farce on. Il faut avoir un grand four pour.
Oui, oui, il faut qu'il soit assez
Oui.
important, oui.
You have to really have a big oven to put this in. Combien de farce à peu près?
Il y a 3 kilos.
3 kilograms,
Oui.
that's about 6 pounds.
Oui.
Combien de tranches auriez-vous?
Oh, un peu
une
près.
quarantaine.
Un peu plus.
About
Un peu
40 or
plus, oui.
50, cinquantaine.
Oui, une cinquantaine de
About
tranches.
50
Oui.
big, beautiful
Oui.
slices. Ça serait bien pour une réception, n'est-ce pas?
Ah oui, oui, ça présente bien, puis
Ouais.
c'est parfait comme ça.
Ouais.
Alors là, on va le jaunir parce qu'on va le rabattre et on le retournera pour mettre sur la plaque.
Aha.
Oui.
So it's going to put this as whole eggs and whole egg glaze. And that's going to make it. C'est pour faire coller la pâte.
C'est ça,
This
oui.
is to make it
Oui.
stick together. Et ça sera pour la décoration.
C'est ça.
Yeah.
Oui.
And then just turn it over like that.
Voilà. Alors,
Hein?
la coupe, là, on ne la verra pas parce qu'on le retournera. Ce
Ah
sera
oui.
donc dessous. Oui.
So this is going to be the
Oui.
underneath
Oui.
part. This
Le
part.
défaut qu'il y a, on ne le verra pas.
C'est comme un petit paquet,
C'est ça.
like a little package.
Alors, on prend une fourchette pour la décoration. Alors, ceci, ça consiste, on le pique comme ça pour pas qu'il éclate.
Oh, this is their making fork marks so it won't burst in the cooking. These are little
Voilà.
professional tricks. Ça, c'est bien.
Voilà. Alors, on va le
Hein?
fariner pour
Flour
pas qu'il
it.
colle sur la plaque.
So it won't stick onto the baking sheet.
Voilà.
Mais ça, c'est intéressant de voir. I see.
Alors, je vais
Bonne
prendre la
idée.
plaque.
On apprend tous les jours quelque chose de nouveau, n'est-ce pas?
Voilà.
Oh, ben, moi, every day something new.
Alors, on va le
Great
mettre sur
big.
la plaque.
Et c'est huilé ou pas?
Non,
Même
on met
pas?
simplement de la farine.
Ah, only flour on it. Ça, c'est...
Et vous allez
Voulez-vous
m'aider
que je vous aide?
à mettre le pâté en croûte
Oui.
dessus. Je vais le mettre là.
Ah oui.
Et
Ce que
les
vous avez,
côtés.
you've tucked in the bottom underneath.
Oui,
Voilà,
oui, comme
there,
ça,
that's-
ça ne bouge plus.
Oui.
Oui, alors,
It's everything's nicely enclosed.
je vais le piquer.
Now this is again doing it with the fork. C'est toujours pour laisser échapper la vapeur,
Voilà.
to let the steam escape. Now I understand this. You floured you floured. Vous avez fariné ceci.
C'est ça.
Instead of oiling it, because there's enough fat in the pate itself, and if you oil it, the crust absorbs the fat, and then it gets rather soft. And so
Alors là,
flouring it works out
aller
much better. Now
Jaunir.
this is egg glaze, doré à l'œuf.
Oui.
C'est l'œuf entier.
L'œuf entier qui est
The whole
battu.
egg, whole
Oui.
egg. C'est énorme, it's so big, n'est-ce pas?
Oui.
J'adore ça. C'est généreux.
Voilà. Alors,
Voilà. Hein?
et nous allons étendre.
Ah, ça c'est pour les décorations.
C'est ça.
We'll make pretty decorations. Qu'est-ce que vous allez faire? Les feuilles, les
Oui, on va
fleurs.
faire une grande feuille dessus
Oui,
comme décoration.
Beautiful big leaves. That's something I want to see how you do. Ah, on vous simplement couper au couteau.
Oui.
Ah, laissez-moi faire très lentement pour que je
Voyez-vous,
je
comme ça,
puisse
ça
voir.
nous fera
Oui.
des feuilles.
Oui. On le coupe simplement en forme de feuille comme
C'est
ça.
ça.
Et puis vous faites les petites marques, little marks, with a knife.
On va l'arranger
Oui.
pour faire une sorte
Ça c'est la branche.
la branche, la
This
grande
is a branch.
branche.
It's going to have big leaves on it. Ça
Voilà.
c'est gentil, n'est-ce pas?
Voilà. Alors on met toujours des feuilles assez importantes.
Ah, ça c'est
Dessus.
gentil de le tourner. Ce
Oui.
que vous l'avez mis
Oui.
comme ça.
C'est ça,
Et
oui.
puis vous l'avez tourné
Et on le
comme
tourne
ça.
comme ça. Pour lui
Ça
donner...
c'est très astuce. Very clever.
Voilà, il faut donner une forme naturelle. Voilà,
Mais ça, c'est très... J'aurais pas pensé à ça.
voyez-vous?
Voilà les
Voilà.
choses professionnelles.
Alors, vous la mettez comme ceci.
Oui.
Une belle
Oh.
orange comme ça, et on
C'est
finit
très gentil.
avec des plus petites.
Oui.
Pour,
Little steam holes. Pour la
Voilà.
vapeur.
pour la vapeur.
Oui.
Voilà.
Il faut même avec le piquage, il faut les trous.
Oui, oui, oui.
Oui. Even if you have the fork that's gone through, you have to have these holes because the steam would burst. Ça fera éclater
C'est
la
ça.
croûte,
Comme,
n'est-ce pas,
comme
autrement.
ça, il ne doit pas éclater.
Voilà. On vous a simplement roulé.
Voilà, oui.
Just little pieces. Quelle espèce de papier?
Oh, c'est un papier fin blanc.
Oui.
On prend du papier blanc pour pas que le papier décolore.
Oui.
Pour pas colorer la pâte.
Et vous n'avez pas huilé ou rien?
Non,
Not
non,
oiled
comme ça, c'est
nor
très bien.
anything.
Ça ne
And
bougera
there it
pas.
is. Voilà. Alors,
Oui.
regardez.
Voilà.
Admirez.
Et il n'y a plus qu'à le mettre au four.
Wasn't he nice? You know, his wife had just had a baby that morning. And this is the same pate, of course not as big. And I've just been painting egg glaze on it, and there are all those holes in the top. I wanted you to see how the decorations were made again, because I think that's part of the professional expertise. So here's some leftover pastry, and he used a knife, but I find a pastry wheel a little bit easier. And this is for the long piece, the branch, which you just drape over the top of the pate. And he says, as he says, to give a forme naturelle. And then the leaves, be sure that you make quite large leaves. And I think cutting them out again with the pastry wheel is a little bit easier, at least it is for me. This was, I think, very clever using the knife this way. I had always before used, oh, you know, a little cutter or something like that. And I think that it just took so much longer time. Now I made a great big leaf. I'm going to put it down there and turn it over. Now that was something I'd never seen done before, which I think is very nice. There's another one. And I'll put one here. And I'll have, there's a rather thinnish one. Oh, that's too thin. I'll put one like this and give it another one of those turned over shapes. And then another leaf here. And then he did his decorations on the, not on the pate. I find it a little easier to do them on the pate. Just take a knife and to make leaf marks like that. And then on the underside, I don't remember. The idea with these decorations that you want to have them rather large and prominent because you want them to show up nicely after baking. And if they're too small, they look itsy bitsy, which is not what you want. And then the rest of this, you've got paint again with egg glaze. And you do this only just before you're going to bake it. If you're going to put the decorations on first, just paint the top of the pate with water, because the egg glaze should only go on at the very last minute. And then give another coat, a double coat of egg glaze, and then take the back of a fork and make little crosshatch marks all over through the egg glaze, because this gives a kind of a more interest to the glaze after baking. I don't know exactly why, but it does. And then after that, you want those little chimney holes. So take a small knife and just make a frank hole right through the pate, right down into the meat, through the dough right down into the meat. And rather than using those little paper things, you can use one of these funnels that go on the end of a pastry bag, or you can make some little things out of aluminum foil wound around a pencil, and then stick a thermometer in and make sure that the goes right down into the center of it. And then you're ready to bake the pate, and you want to bake it in a 425-degree oven, and in the middle rack for about 30 minutes or until the pastry begins to brown nicely. And then bake it at 350 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes, again till it browns nicely. And then if it seems to be bubbling quite a bit, turn the oven down to 325 or even 300. This pate is about 20 inches long, 6 inches wide, and 3.5 inches high. And it will take about 1 hour and 3/4 to 2 hours to reach 165 degrees on your thermometer. And if you don't have a thermometer, look into the funnels, and the juices should all run clear yellow and not rosy. And if they're rosy, let it bake a little bit more. And then when it's done, you want to take it out of the oven and put a spoon like this underneath and let all the fat and juices run down to the side of the pan and take them out, suck them out. And you want to make sure that you have a pan that has a rim on it. Otherwise, because the pate will exude juice, they'll all fall down into the oven, and then you'll have a terrible mess. And you can serve the pate warm, but it's usually served cold. If you want to serve it warm, let it sit at room temperature for about 30 minutes to allow the meat juices to retreat back into the pate. And then take it out and put it on a serving platter. And if you want to serve it cold, let it cool off completely at room temperature and then refrigerate it. And I'm going to show you how to cut it. As you will notice in here, there is a gap between crust and meat. And this you can fill with an aspic. There's not a very large one, but you can. I'm going to cut a piece and put it on the plate so you can see it. And the clear aspic would be a very nice thing to put in, and you put it in through the funnel holes, and all that is say 2 cups of consommé in 1 envelope of gelatin. Just pour it in the funnel holes when the pate is cold. Now see, when you want to give a party and you want to have it for a lot of people, and you need one great, big, beautiful thing to show, this pate en croûte is really an absolutely beautiful thing to show, to make, because you can make it just as big as you want. The only limitation is your oven. That's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit!
This program was made possible by a grant from Polaroid Corporation. Julia Child is the author of From Julia Child's Kitchen, which includes the recipes from this program.